Millions of people have lost weight with personalized plans from Noom. Like Evan, who can't stand salads and still lost 50 pounds.
Salads generally for most people are the easy button, right? For me, that wasn't an option. I never really was a salad guy. That's just not who I am. But Noom worked for me.
Get your personalized plan today at Noom.com. Real Noom user compensated to provide their story. In 4 weeks, the typical Noom user can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Individual results may vary.
Hello, Paul.
Good evening, Sir Dennis. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Very well, and welcome all to Villa Through the Years, Champions of Europe. How wonderful does that sound, Dennis?
Well, it always sounds good. Yeah, it's it was a great, from my point of view. Having won the league the season before, it was just the icing on the cake, really. To, in a way, I feel prove to everybody that being champions in 80-81 was no fluke, and going on to win the Champions League, or well, the European Cup as it was then. You know, it was accomplished. You know, with very much the same players, that had played in 80-81, and you know, at the start of that season, if anyone thought that Aston Villa would get to the final and would win it, I wouldn't have thought there'd been too many, because obviously I don't think we did. Yeah, but there was a chance. There's always a chance, Paul, and we took that chance, and everything worked out well in the end.
Given the fact that England had a really good record in Europe, in the European Cup in particular, we had that stranglehold on it from 77 through to 1982, and two Scousers from the same school lifted it, which that will never ever be repeated. But Aston Villa were at least the equal to either Liverpool or Nottingham Forest. I just think that with Villa and the perception of Villa, it was they only won the league in 81, and then they played the European Cup. They had no internationals in the team. They were just a side from the middle of the country in Birmingham. But Saunders had developed a really good team, or you could argue certainly two teams, both in well, Villa's team that went on and was more successful than the first team, in the image of the first team. But Villa had been knocking on that door for several seasons and had some fantastic players, Dennis.
Yeah, I would agree, Paul. You know, we were from. You know, we've spoken about it before about the 76-77 team and how they should have been more successful. But we never reached the heights that I felt we would do, especially after that season. So you know, we mentioned before as well about Ron building another team in that model.
Yep,
and he did.
Yeah, he did.
And you're right. You know, I think one of the difficult things is when people say Aston Villa, they wonder where it is.
Yes.
It's not like Liverpool or Nottingham. You know, you can easily pinpoint that on the map. You know, but when you look at Aston Villa, people will think, well, where is this team? And then I think the other side of it as well is that does it get recognised as being one of the first teams, you know, to form the football, you know, sort of leagues. Yeah. It's got such a history, but that history, I think, was all before the war. Yeah. It was all before the wars. Yeah. After the wars, there was the FA Cup win, you know, with the Johnny Dixon team.
Yeah.
In 57, was it 58?
57.
Anyway.
Yeah,
57. And that was the last time, really, that a big prize had been won, because when you look at the big prizes, it's the FA Cup, it's winning the championship, and then you know the icing on the cake is winning a European trophy. So it'd never been done by us. But then again, you go, as you say, you go forward a couple of years and you see what Forest did. You know, I mean, that was just phenomenal, really, where they came from. At least when you look at Villa, you know, you think about the history. Whereas with Forest, they don't have that history that was associated to the football club. So, you know, from our point of view, or from, you know, a fan's perspective of Aston Villa, they should have been winning more, I suppose, because it was a big club and obviously still is. Yeah. So, the recognition was bypassing a lot of people. And I think as the years wore on, I think we seemed to drift out of people's vision and minds about, oh yeah, Aston Villa once won the European Cup. Yeah. But listen, we know we're in the records books. We know we're in the history books. So from our point of view, yeah, we will always be, the greatest Villa side to have won the league and win the European Cup until another team does it.
I've just got to do to you what Alan Hudson always does to me. I've got to correct you, Paul. You are the greatest West Midlands side that has ever played football since 1888. That's how magnificent Aston Villa, your achievement with your players, has been to win the league and then win the European Cup. I know teams win the Champions League now, but it's easier to win the Champions League because you don't have to play 42 league games to get into that tournament. You can finish fourth in your league. So for me, it's always been the more difficult trophy to win, the European Cup. It's the defining champions of Europe.
I wouldn't disagree with you, Paul.
Yeah.
You said it the way, any commentator like yourself would, because you understand the game, you understand the achievement.
Yeah.
As a player, sometimes you try to sort of not knock it down, but sort of be a little bit more sympathetic about it. Yeah, you don't want to overblow the achievement. But I think when you think 40 years ago, which is what it was, this season now, 81, 82. This was the start of that road to Rotterdam, as we called it in our book that we brought out at the end of that, or in 20 years after it, when we had a celebration. And it's from that book where, I think I've got some really good stories and quotes, about the games that we played. Because when we discussed them, this book that was written for us by Rob Bishop, who is a reporter who does a lot of work for the Villa these days, but also is a great writer of books as well about, in the Midlands. And Rob wrote this book in 2001, to commemorate the road, and it was called The Road to Rotterdam. And it was a book that went out there. And for those people who got the book, it really is a good read. But you can't get it now, unless you buy it off someone else, or you find it somewhere where, in a library or something. But it really is a good read, because it tells a story, really, of that road to Rotterdam. And it was a long road, Paul, because you can imagine our first game was on the 16th of September. So we're close to that now. So it's an early start. And the last game, obviously, was the 26th.
26th of May, yeah.
Yeah, 26th of May. Let me just get that right. 26th of May in Rotterdam. And in between that was a bit of a disastrous season in the league.
Yeah.
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 So, something we could touch on. But obviously, the winning of the European Cup was the big thing for us that year.
Let's just talk briefly about Rob. I mean, Rob's got a tremendous career as a journalist doing stuff for Aston Villa. He also did a piece, Bishop's Buzz, in the Sports Argus that was always a very, very enjoyable read. The guy is an encyclopedia of football, particularly Aston Villa. And I just think 40 years on, he done it 20 years ago. I think the publishers should do a rerun and publish a load more books, so Villa supporters of the more modern age can buy that book and read just how fantastic you guys were in those days. Because you're right, it's a story that should be told, it needs to be told. There's also a BT documentary that's coming out, or there was certainly talks about that documentary being aired around about the 26th of May. next year to commemorate the 40 years of your fantastic achievement. Is that still going to be coming out?
I'll whisper this to you, Paul.
Yes,
so
please.
so you can keep this one under your hat until next week. But we're
Okay.
going to make a through the AV40 website.
Yeah.
We're going to make an announcement that we are at the moment doing that filming.
Yeah.
So we started yesterday. We've done today, and we're doing tomorrow. So
Brilliant.
what they're doing with us, Paul, is that there's going to be 12 players who are going to get their face on, in this documentary. And it's going to be on BT Sport, and as you say, it's going to be next May, before the European final, the Champions League final. So far, we're doing about 3 players a day. So I was on yesterday morning, first off. Ken McNaught made his way down from Scotland, to come and do the second session. And Jimmy Rimmer came up from Swansea to do the third session. So that was the order yesterday. So all 3 of those guys, all 3 of us we had lengthy talks with the guy who's in charge of it, something like about a couple of hours. So there's going to be a lot of stuff that he's going to collect, and then he's going to have to turn that into an hour and a half, something like that, show. Today we had Alan Evans, who was up from Devon. Gordon Cowans and Tony Morley then were this afternoon. Tomorrow we've got Gary Shaw, Des Bremner, and Kenny Swain. But so they're the 9 that we're going to sort of do this week, and then we're going to get Nigel Spink later on in the year, and Colin Gibson, and also Peter, and you can't miss Peter out because he scored the goal. Yeah, as you can't miss Nigel out.
Yes.
Yeah, because Nigel came on for his first ever game, playing in the first team. Yeah, in Rotterdam. I mean, how many people would have come onto that scene, first game ever in the European Cup final, and put in a fantastic performance. And, that was the highlight of his career, that one. But so there'll be 12 of us who'll be making a contribution to it, and it's good contributions as well. The guy who's doing the interview, he's very good. He's done a lot of research. He asks good questions. But a lot of it, what he's coming from, he's done his research, and it's coming from, publications that are out there, that have been written before.
Yeah.
And I gave him quite a bit of info from, I don't know whether you've ever seen it, but there's a bloke, a book that Dave Woodall did.
Right.
A big fanzine writer.
Yeah, no, Dave. Heroes and Villains.
Dave.
Yep.
Yeah, and I've read it quite a few times. Sort of when I've been talking to people, just to pick up 1 or 2 little snippets, and and I sort of I gave that book to the guy who's doing the interview and doing the research, but I spoke to him about it and gave him some ideas, from Dave's book, and I hope he won't mind us, sort of giving him a mention. But it's his book called Champions, 81, and it's a month by month preview of the season. But he's got some really good stuff in it. And any Villa fan out there, who really wants to read about that season, I really think personally that's the definitive book to get. Yeah. So look out for that. It's Champions by Dave Woodall. Yeah. And,
I will buy that as well.
Really good.
Yeah.
It's great. It really is a good book, Paul, to read, because it gives you everything you want to know from a real big Villa fan. Yeah. A big Villa fan, massive Villa fan. And and it's I think Dave's been really honest in there as well. So it's well worth a read. Yeah, if you haven't got that one. So there's another one to get. Yeah. It's The Champions by Dave Woodall and The Road to Rotterdam by Rob Bishop.
Dave is a good lad, as is Rob. There's also another couple of books I'm going to mention. Barton's Army, that's coming out by Colin Abbott, a friend of ours. Ticket to the Moon by Richard Sydenham. and also a book written about Ron Saunders, The Odd Man Out by
Yeah,
Graham
I've read
Denton.
it.
Some great Villa books,
Yes.
and they were just halcyon days for Aston Villa. But you're right. I mean, Dave has been about, and his mate Percy. I know them two fellas from way back when,
Yes. Yes.
and as it's great memories. The clocks are going back shortly. They go back in October. And there's always a standard line from Birmingham City supporters that the clocks are going back an hour on Saturday. But for Aston Villa, the clocks are going back to 1982. And that's where we're going now, Dennis. We are going back to 1982. The season is just ready to kick off. You're doing your pre-season. You've previously done your pre-season before and thought, hang on a minute, we've got half a chance of doing something. Talking and doing a podcast with Tony Morley, he was telling me that Ron sat you down and says, look, we got Peter with you here now. I think we've got a chance. If we get above Liverpool, I think we can win this. What was the feeling like as champions going in to defend the title and having a bite at the European Cup? Because you'd only really brought in Andy Blair and one or two kids coming up from the youth. There wasn't much spending at Aston Villa at that time. Is that something that, with retrospect and looking back, was a little bit of a mistake? Would you have preferred to have seen another couple of players coming through with a bit more European experience?
Not necessarily, because when I look back on the championship winning season, the football we played at times was outstanding.
Yeah.
And when you think of some of the teams we played, who had players who were internationals, and we didn't have any, we were never left sort of worrying about it. We never struggled against teams who had, take Ipswich. Obviously they were chasing us for the title, but their side, has been mentioned before, was full of internationals. English, Scottish, Dutch. They had a team of internationals. We had nothing. But when you play against a team like Ipswich and you measure yourself against them, I always felt that we were just as equal. So I don't think going into the season thinking we've got Europe. I think the important thing really was to try to get off to a good start. Yeah, which was a disaster.
Really just.
As I said earlier, the league program, for us it was a disaster compared to the season before. And to lose against the team that had got promoted from the second division, as it was then, Notts County. To lose 1-0 in the first game at home. That was it. Because, and I tell you why it was difficult to take, because I thought we'd had a really good pre-season again. We'd been in the Community Shield against Tottenham, which we drew 2-2. But I think, from my point of view, I thought things were looking pretty good to get a good start. But when I think we won one game in 9 games at the start of that season. We won 6 games in 25 games in the league. Disaster. And when we also go back to the season before, if you remember that statistic, we played 14 sort of local Midland derbies. We won 11 and drew 3. The following season, we've only won 7. We've lost 5 of them and drawn 3. So we've lost our way a little bit during the sort of the heavy battles of local derbies. But as a team to be knocked down, you're always the team now where everyone wants to say, well, we'll measure ourselves now against last year's champions. But we never came up playing in the league to that kind of level. I know we brought Andy Blair in, but I still think with what we had good young players. Brendan Olmsey was coming through. Obviously, Gordon Cowans now was getting stronger and better all the time. Gary Shaw now was getting stronger and better all the time. I think Terry Donovan was another player
yes, he was.
that we brought in. and Terry Bullivant was another one.
Yeah.
Yeah, who we brought in as well. But the thing was is if you look at Terry was a central midfield player, right? But Terry didn't play like I played. Terry liked to play in midfield and just play the ball about from that position.
Yeah.
When I played and me and Des, we would make that extra man forward. We'd get beyond the forward, so we would cause teams more problems with our runs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas Terry would be trying to do that with the ball.
Yep.
Yeah. So there was a bit difference. I mean, Andy was a similar player. Andy Blair. Andy was similar to Terry in a way. Was wanted to play more in the midfield area, and not be particular looking to get make runs forward, which was a thing I believe was our ace in the hole really the season before, because we caused teams a lot of problems with the runs that we were making, and also the fact that Gordon Cowans was supplying so many good balls forward, that we were able to do them knowing that we would get the ball. So that was an important cog in our team. So trying to replace like for like when someone was out of the team, that was always going to be difficult from Ron's point of view. But he tried to bring in players who he felt would be able to keep the momentum going. Yeah, but at the same time, it meant that there was an adjustment to the way we played. Yeah, but in taking that was never taken away from the ability of those players, Paul. Yeah, Ron bought players because he thought they could do a job. He didn't just go out and spend money. I mean, I think the big thing he said about Liverpool was that Liverpool would always buy a couple of players who supposedly were going to put pressure on the players that were in the team. Yeah. But if you read Bob Paisley's book, it's quite interesting sometimes. They bought players only because they wanted to avoid tax at the end of the season.
Indeed, yeah. Absolutely.
So some of the players he actually bought, they had like £300,000, which now, do they pay tax or they go and spend it on a player?
Yeah.
So they spend it on a player, but that player then, as soon as the season started, would be sold because he wasn't really bought to play in the first team. He was there now to stop them paying tax that tax year. So it's interesting, how teams did it. But everyone thought that, Liverpool, they'd buy a couple of players who would immediately put some of the other players in the team under a bit of pressure and make them keep playing hard and playing, sort of 100%. But, I personally, I feel that, as a player, you've got your own pride, you've got your own standards. So if you drop below those standards, you should know yourself. You don't need someone to tell you. Yeah. And so I think Ron, I think he felt that what he had, the nucleus of his team with the good young players coming through, getting better and stronger all the time. I just think he thought he'd had enough.
Yeah, and Mark Walters was another one, wasn't he, that was ready to break through into that team?
Mark came, I think, more in the next season.
Yeah.
When we were again playing in Europe, and we got to the quarter-final the following year, lost to Juventus. But Mark started to make his way forward really that following year.
But you'd got those young uns coming through because Villa have always had a good academy. I mean, back then it probably wasn't known as an academy, but they were youth team players. But they'd always had a good crop and always coming through. A little bit like Liverpool, if you like. That's a very good example. You did touch upon you had no international players in your team. But that wasn't because of a lack of ability. That was only because the England manager or the Scotland manager or whatever manager didn't pick you. Because all you players could have played international level because you were all of that level. So when I look at Ipswich, had a team of internationals. Yeah, they were a good team. But Villa were, for me, a better team. And Howard Kendall, when I was doing the interview with Tony Morley, Howard Kendall said, Villa's midfield four was the best midfield four in the country by a mile, and I'd echo that because it had absolutely everything. It had yourself, it had Des, it had Sid, and it had Tony Morley. And I think that if you put those four in any team today, that you would still be as great today as what you was back then, Dennis.
I think we would have had to have changed the way we played, though, Paul, in midfield.
Possibly.
You know the way the game's played now. I think a lot of it is playing out from the back and centre halves playing the ball into midfield, but they don't play the ball into midfield a lot of the time. They're actually already in midfield.
Yeah.
The centre halves.
Yes, absolutely.
So if you watch the way England play, I feel that the two centre halves have more passes than any other players on the pitch for England.
Yeah, I do.
Because the ball always seems to be going from one side of the pitch to the other.
Yep.
And it's in that midfield area where it happens because a lot of teams just drop off.
Yeah.
And get behind the ball. So your midfield players, in a way, the sort of type of midfield player that we were, I don't think we would have been able to play the game today because, for one thing, one of our players was obviously me and Des trying to get behind defenders from the opposition.
Mm.
Well, if you look at defenders these days, they're so far back, when they defend.
Yeah, it's very true.
That was going to be difficult. And to be honest, when we start talking about the final against Bayern, I think that was one of the reasons why we didn't penetrate as much in that game as we'd done in previous games because they played so deep.
Yeah.
That the runs I would try to make or the runs they'd try to make, we just couldn't get there.
Yeah.
Because it was too far up.
Mm.
They were too far back. So we never got in a situation where we got behind them. And I think that the only time we did get behind them in the game, there might have been others, but there weren't too many. The only time we really got behind them was when Tony got into this penalty area and pulled that ball back for Peter, who slotted it into the back of the net.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be too far off saying that was probably one of not many times we actually got behind them.
Mm.
So, and we scored the goal. So, I think it was a difficult game for us, I think, in midfield because of the way they played. And I reckon they'd done their own work on us. Yeah, they must have done, because I don't know whether that was the way they played all the time. We didn't have any footage of them. We had no idea
back in those days
how they played.
Yeah.
So I can't remember, ever sitting down in a meeting with Tony once we knew we were in the final, and looking at any videos or even Tony telling us how they played. Yeah. So I can't remember having seen them play their semi-final, to be honest.
No,
yeah.
I must admit, I can't. But you played your first game on the 16th of September, FC Valor of Reykjavik. How did you feel when you got drawn out of the hat to an Icelandic team?
Well, I think it was a bonus.
Yeah.
The reason I say that, Paul, is because, we could have so easily done what Forest did in their first year in the European Cup and drew Liverpool. Yeah. And gone out of the tournament.
Yeah.
We might not have done, but I'm just saying, yes. I just felt that the draw was great for us,
nice
really.
Draw, yeah.
And we didn't know anything about them, but, coming from Iceland, you wouldn't expect them to be a great team. They'd have ability. But they're not going to have the same. They're not going to train as hard as we do. They're not going to play the type of football that we play. Week in and week out. So from my point of view, I think most of the lads, I think we thought, well, this is a good draw for us. Yeah, and it proved to be. Yeah, especially at home. I think we're all looking forward to it. I suppose really Paul, the disappointment of it was the attendance.
Yes, 20,481. I looked at that and I thought, wow, that's low. Why?
Yeah. Well, we all know that even the season before how difficult a time Birmingham was going through with job losses and and strikes and everything, and there was it wasn't a good time for workers.
It wasn't,
So
no.
I think, going into that, I mean, people probably would have, supporters would have bought their season tickets, but in those days, I don't know whether European games would have been included in it.
100% no. Yeah, definitely
No,
not.
so maybe the fans just thought, well, the early rounds should have been included in the season ticket. But if you read the stories, and around that time, the club was, in a lot of debt.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was a worry. It was a worry from Ron, when you read the stories that were going round about how much they were in debt and everything. I think it was over 1 million at the time. Now, that doesn't seem much today, does it? It's billions now that they're in debt, like Barcelona and Real Madrid. But 1 million was a lot of money then, and I'd read a report where Ron was being asked questions about would he have to sell his star players.
Yeah.
And, I mean, this is coming after winning the league, and he's being asked questions because of the fact that there's a big debt, whether he'd have to sell his best players. And, Ron would say, well, no, why would I want to sell my best players? Yeah. And he wouldn't even talk about the money because it didn't bother him. Yeah. He sort of, he knew what he wanted. And he managed the club in a way. So he was aware of, he was quite clever from a monetary point of view. So he would have had his finger on the pulse, but he knew what was possible, and there was no way that he would have sold players from that minute. But we ended up 5-0 winners. That was a good start. And Terry Donovan played in that game instead of Shoresy.
Yes, scored 2 goals because Gary was injured, wasn't he?
He was injured, yeah. So Peter got a couple, and Tony Morley got these. I mean, we started quite bright as Tony scored in the 6th minute. So that was a good start for us. Get settled down. It was probably a lovely evening as well.
Yeah.
A nice September evening. The pitch would have been in great condition. I always liked playing midweek games in those early stages because the first game usually was played in red hot sunshine, which when we played, I remember playing against Notts County in that first game. It was a hot day again, and you sometimes feel like you'd rather it was wet and windy instead of being hot and sunny.
Yep.
But no excuses. But this was a great night. I think it was quite a sunny evening and a great result for us. So what we had there was to look forward to the away leg, which was more interesting because of where we had to go.
Ice, fishy smells, and
yes.
what a journey that would have been, wouldn't it? How did you get there? By boat, or did you get there by a single-engined aeroplane? What was the journey like there to Vallor?
Well, apparently, these are Rob's words. Yeah.
Yeah.
We chartered an Icelander, Icelander Boeing 727.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And we landed at the United States Air Force Base at Keflavik, Monday afternoon in late September. Yeah. And the impression that we had there, and this is a quote from Gary Shaw. He said, when we arrived in Iceland, it was like landing on the moon. He remembers. The place was covered in rocks and black dust, which was totally alien to us. I'd never seen anything like it. Well, Gary Shaw wouldn't have seen anything like this because he lived in Birmingham, didn't he?
Gary Shaw lived down the road from me and we went to the same school. So Gary living in Meriden Drive, it would have been like landing on the moon. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was, so we get there, but I think it was, I think the real impression then was about how cold it was, cold wind, and some of the lads, it was they were really feeling it. And there's a little quote here from about Ivor Linton, who was with the party. Yeah, he says, I'm trying to think. It was one of the subs was saying I was sitting on the bench next to Ivor Linton, and the gel in his hair started to freeze. Yeah, and you can imagine that, couldn't you? You know, being so cold, like being out on a cold day, icy day, and you know your sort of nose is dripping, and it starts to sort of get a little bit a bit icy under your nose, like an icicle. But it was cold. But the fish thing was the off-putting thing, because when we played the game, it was blowing down. The smell was coming, and it was blowing down the pitch. So, and it never went away. Yeah, it was there all the time, the whole game. So the impressions we got from our first trip abroad in Europe, yeah. In some ways, you could say that playing Valor and going to Iceland, at least the hotels that we stayed, or the hotel we stayed in, was decent.
Yeah.
When we move on to Berlin and Russia,
nightmares, weren't they?
Yeah, I'd rather be going back to Iceland than going to those places. Yeah.
Oh my life!
You know, but listen, we got through it, and I think I remember a quote that I read from their chairman after the game, after we'd beaten them 5-0. Yeah, I think there was a quote from their chairman says, "Well, just wait until we get them back to our pitch," you know. And we've won the game 5-0, and he's quoting something like this. Yeah, he was a bit optimistic. Yeah,
a bit optimistic. Jesus.
Yeah, but listen, you know, it was we were through to the next round. So that was 2 games out of 9, because that's all we were going to play to get to the final. Yeah, it was 9 games. Yeah, so
13 goals scored.
Yes.
And only 2 conceded.
Yes.
And they were
by the same team as well.
Next opponents, Dynamo Berlin.
Yes.
So you've come on the back. You're happy there. You've gone into the draw for the next round. You've drawn Dynamo Berlin. By the way, before you went to Valor, you played Manchester United at home and Liverpool away. So that was a nice little either side.
It was, wasn't it? Yeah, I think we drew both those games, didn't we?
You did 1-1. Sid scored at against Man United. 0-0 against Liverpool. You drew your next game before you went for the second leg, Birmingham City 0-0, and you drew the game after against Leeds United away 1-1. So you'd won in Europe, but you drew both sides of the European tie. In the Football League. And I think that was the theme, wasn't it? It wasn't as though you were getting beaten heavily. You were just drawing games and not being able to finish off teams like you did so successfully the season before. So you've got Dynamo Berlin. What was your ideas about Berlin? Because we had the wall up in those days, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It hadn't come down yet, had it?
No. So when you look back on it, we're going to a place where it's obviously behind the Iron Curtain. And what we know about the Iron Curtain is that from watching televisions, like, you know, the spy who came in from the cold and everything.
Yeah, and Elton John.
You know, all those films of, you know, of sort of spies and everything that you've seen. It always looked a very drab. The kind of place where you just wouldn't want to go.
Yeah.
There was, what I would say about Berlin, and also this applied to Russia as well, is that there was no colour there, Paul.
Yeah. Cold, you know, granite in it.
Well, the fact that we were going in, you know, like the second game now was in October against Berlin, so we're now into sort of early winter. Yeah. And in places like Berlin and obviously Kiev, you know, we're really getting into the winter time, and there's just no colour. I was just amazed by the lack of, like, all the cars were black, or grey, you know, but there was no, like, there'd be no trees, you know, there's no autumn leaves or anything like that, and all the buildings are very drab, and look run down and everything. So it's it wasn't a place you'd want to go on holiday too long, because I think you'd probably find yourself sort of trying to climb that wall as quickly as you could to get out.
You can understand why, when you look at the stereotypical East German or Russian, that they've never got smiles on their faces. It's quite understandable, because it must be like a war of attrition just getting through a 24-hour period in a drab, dull and desperate standard of living that they seem to live in those days. And to be fair, some of them probably still do to this day now.
Mm. No, it was, the weren't smiles. I think, when they would look at us, they would be looking at like as if they were looking at aliens,
Yeah,
from
absolutely.
another planet,
Yeah.
and so from that point of view, you really wanted to be friendly with people, but they didn't want to be friendly back.
Yeah.
That I suppose there'd be too much suspicion that, if you touch them now, they think now you've given them some kind of disease.
Yeah.
Because you are coming from a different landscape altogether.
Yeah.
And how much they knew about the other side, I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Did they see sort of news stories about what was happening in the West? Even just what was happening on the other side of the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah. So were they in touch with what was happening in the rest of the world?
Oh,
I doubt it very
100%.
much.
100% no. I remember Ron that he took his Albion team to China, and he was telling me that they were taken around by some fella in a like grey boiler suit from the party, who was a right miserable piece. He says by the end of like when Albion come back to Birmingham, the bloke was in tears when they went. I don't think he'd ever seen anything like that in his life, and I'm guessing that East Germany and Russia would be exactly the same. They just live in their own little East German and Iron Curtain kind of bubble, if you like.
Yeah, I think when we it's quite interesting as well. The game. So we played the first game away, and we won 2-1. And Tony got both goals. Tony Morley.
Great goals.
His second one in the 85th minute. Was just reading Rob's report here. It was subsequently voted goal of the season by the Midland Soccer Writers.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and it was a great goal. It was what I would call a typical Tony Morley goal.
Yeah.
Once Tony got playing in the first team, which he had done the season before, he was able to express himself in a way that he'd done, previously when he was playing for Burnley, because that was why Ron brought him to the football club, because what he could do. And it was so Tony now is getting that award for goal of the season by the Midland Soccer Writers, to follow on from the season before when he got goal of the season on the BBC, match of the day. So he was, he did have his worth, you might say, Paul, and he did play his part, from that point of view. But it was, I think the most interesting thing about Tony's goals, you'll have read this, and I think a lot of people will have heard Tony talk about this. But he had this thing with Ron. He had this sort of situation with Ron.
The dreaded Anthony.
Absolutely, Anyway, he said, Tony says here, I had a bit of a go with Ron, Morley calls. I was trying a few things, and he said, you'll never score 2 goals in a match because you're too flash. Yeah. So after I scored my second, I ran past the dugout and stuck 2 fingers up to him.
Yep.
I was just trying to tell him I'd scored twice. At least that's the story I'm sticking to. He didn't say a word to me after the game, or for about a week afterwards. Then he called me into his office and said, those were the best 2 goals I've ever seen. And by the way, I'm fining you a week's wages. At least he gave it to charity. That's Tony's story. Yeah. And he loves that story. Yeah. And
He
I
tells.
couldn't tell you whether it's true or not, but it's a great story really, because he did have this this sort of ongoing sort of love-hate relationship with Ron. Yeah, but I think it was just all Ron's psychology really. Yeah.
It was, because listening to you guys and talking to you guys and reading about Villa and reading about Saunders, the guy was an absolute genius. He knew how to and what buttons to press. And with Sid, with Gary Shaw, and with Tony Morley, the younger players in the team, he would just wind them up. But he done the same with Brian Little. Remember Brian telling me
Yeah.
he used to
Yeah.
sit in the office or the dressing room in Ron Saunders and run and say, "Do you know what? I want to punch you in the face."
It's true. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, these are the kind of stories that, you know, you read in the books that they've written, like
Yeah,
Brian
absolutely.
Books
Yeah.
and all that, you know.
Mm.
But I'm one of those guys that, you know, in all the time I was at Villa, and that was 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And okay, Ron, you know, wasn't there for the last couple of years that I
Mm.
was at the football club. But sometimes the stories I read about how hard the training was and everything at Villa, yeah, and how Ron, you know, really sort of worked his hard from that point of view.
Yeah.
I didn't see that.
Mm.
I was never in agreement with that. Yeah, because I felt I'd come from Coventry City where I'd run harder without the ball
Yeah.
than I ever did at Villa. At Villa,
Mm.
yeah, and so I was, and you know, I also, when I read where people thought that we were super fit, and you know, that was the thing that won the championship for us. Again, I would rubbish that, Paul, by
Yeah.
saying we were fit,
Yeah.
but we also had ability
Oh, 100%.
in the team,
Yeah.
and it wasn't just the fact that we were fit
Mm.
and we could run teams off the park, because that's a fallacy, because there was games, you know, which we lost. Well, if we were fit and would run teams off, why did we ever lose a game?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was something I just felt that got linked to Ron, because he liked the myth
Yeah.
of people saying that he was an hard man and he trained us like
Mm.
a sergeant major.
Yeah.
Yeah. And from my point of view, I never saw that. I saw it totally different because of my previous club, where I felt I did a lot more running without a ball
Mm.
than I ever did when I was at Villa Park. Because I felt when I was at Villa, Ron tried to get us to use the ball more than ever. Yeah, in small-sided games. When I say small-sided games, we play on half a pitch.
Yeah.
It'd be like 8v8.
Mm.
Yeah, and there wasn't a lot of room, but so you had to play quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you had to play with a lot of accuracy. But I also felt in those days as well, there was you know, that everyone wanted to win in training.
Yeah.
And there's always this mantra where you know about training and playing. If you don't train like you play, how can you just turn it on?
Mm.
But you can't. It's
Yeah.
not possible. You know, and so that was an important part of Ron. And I think this kidology that Ron had, yeah, with the reporters as well as the players.
Yeah.
I never experienced that myself.
Mm.
Yeah. But obviously I've got to take Brian's word for it. I've got to take Tony's word for it, you know. But when I do take the word for it, you know, I sometimes think, like with Tony, yeah, it's a great story, and you keep telling it.
Yeah, I think they're all 100% true. I
Yeah.
think the thing is with you were the captain. You were older, and I think with Saunders, he just knew what buttons to press, and he'd press them. And Brian would say, "Well, if it makes you feel better, boss, do it." And he'd wind Saunders up then. So, but he would do things. And Brian said, in my management, when I was a manager, I look back. And I've done a lot of things that Ron Saunders done to me, and it made more sense, me as a manager. And Andy Gray tells similar stories about Ron Saunders as well.
Yeah,
And you
absolutely.
know, he just had a way, and I think was a fantastic manager, a genius of a manager. And managers like that do have their special ways of doing it, and that's why they're successful. That's what makes them different from the rest.
You're right. I think getting back to the game, Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was also a really important episode as well. If you remember, Jimmy Rimmer saved the penalty.
It was a fantastic save. But how mad a save was it as well, Dennis?
I
Because
know.
it hits the post, and then
Yes.
it hits Jimmy Rimmer on the feet, and then
Mm.
bounces back out, so it makes the ball live again.
Yes. Yeah.
Normally, you'd hit that there. I've watched it 100 times. You'd hit that ball, you hit the post, bounce back out, and the ball's dead.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
it hits him on the back of the heels.
I know. But because the guy got to the rebound, but
Yeah.
Jimmy's actually it's managed to get his leg to it, and it's looped over the bar. So if that had been, I mean, to be honest as well, it was a penalty decision which should never have been a decision.
Yeah.
So, but listen, we come away from that game 2-1. Yeah, and I mean, this is a quote from me. So the lasting impression of the Berlin team is their athleticism. Pace and strength were big factors in their game, but they also had a lot of ability. They were very strong and were good runners with the ball, so we had to be on our toes. We went about it in the right way, defending in depth and then looking to hit them on the break. Tony's goal was a classic counter-attack. And that just summed it up, really, because I think one of the things I felt that when you go behind the Iron Curtain, you're going to come up against super fit players.
Yeah.
And
Army teams.
Yeah, and they were, they were main. I mean, we probably played against their international team.
Yeah.
And the other interesting thing was that we noticed was that there was so many soldiers who were at the game.
Yeah, they were all their mates.
Not just in the Berlin game.
Yeah.
But in the Kiev game in Russia, it actually seemed as if everybody in the ground was a soldier.
Yeah.
It seemed that way.
They probably were, Dennis.
It might have been, yeah. But they were all suited in their uniforms.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know whether they expected that they might have trouble on the pitch, and we need all those.
All the terraces, but we'll leave that to Anderlecht.
Yeah, to sort us out. Yeah.
I mean, they'll say, why wasn't there any trouble in Berlin or Kiev? Well, you ain't gonna. If you're gonna cause any trouble there, it's gonna be Anderlecht in Brussels.
Yes.
Well, in Belgium, isn't it? I mean, dear me. But again, what I loved about that goal from Tony Morley, I mean, the first goal, that volley, fantastic. But the second goal, the way Gary Shaw made that run, he made the run, created the space, and then it just gave Tony a free run there, and he just set off like a whippet or a greyhound that's just seen the rabbit.
No, it was a great run. It was typical Tony.
Brilliant.
85th minute where you look at maybe a tyrant. Yeah. Because it was a physical game. It was tough, but so he would have been doing his part for us. And then he gets 85th minute, gets an opportunity to break, and then he's in there scoring a great goal, and really giving us that lead that we needed.
Yeah.
Because as we well know, away goals would count as double in the case of a draw.
Yeah.
And that would prove to be, from our point of view, the deciding factor, because we would lose at home 1-0. But the fact that we'd got the away goals, there was no extra time. Yeah, there was nothing, for us to worry about now. We lose 1-0, we're through.
Yeah.
So that was, I suppose it was pleasing that we got through. We're overjoyed. But I suppose losing at home 1-0, at times, they scored in the 14th minute.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we had a long time to go before the end of the game. And I'm sure there would have been other opportunities for their team, but obviously opportunities for us as well.
Yeah.
But we weren't able to score. But from our point of view, yeah, it was an ideal win, and we're through to the next round. And the interesting thing then is that we're in the quarterfinals, Paul.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, Kiev away.
And
God.
And the next game's not until March.
Yeah.
The 3rd. So we can now safely start thinking to ourselves, well, let's get on with the league and let's start winning a few games. Yeah. But The other thing about that year, if you remember, it was when it was 3 points a win.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
So I think from our point of view, that was drawing in all those games. It was losing 2 points and not one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Do
it was.
Notts County
Yeah,
done the double over
yeah,
you that year?
yeah, yeah. They did, because we beat them now in the cup.
In the FA Cup, you beat them 6-0.
Yeah, but the game.
It's mad, isn't it?
But then it was mad, because we played them at their ground and beat them 6-0 on a really
Yeah.
good day in winter.
January the
But
5th.
the following week, which was the FA Cup third round,
Yeah.
it was, the weather had turned for the worst, and it was a frozen pitch, Paul, and we should never have played on it.
Yeah.
They wouldn't let players play on a pitch
Nah.
like that today.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you see, they had this thing about, referees. Referees had to make those decisions, but they don't have to run around on that pitch, have to twist
Absolutely.
and turn.
Yeah.
But also, it's our career.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they won 1-0. Yeah. And I think the game was an absolute farce. And
Yeah.
we kept on saying to the referee, "Look, you got to cancel this. You got to postpone this. This is not right."
Mm.
And he must have seen that there was no way that football could be played. It was a lottery. But I just felt there should have been a better way of the referee deciding that game, should have been played.
Mm.
Because I don't think he took into consideration, our health and safety.
I don't think they ever did back in those
They
days,
didn't.
Dennis.
No.
I mean, today,
No.
you're right. Today, you'd look at that pitch inspection. Absolutely no chance of getting that game started, let alone getting it finished. It would have just been postponed. But, back in them days, we did play on icy pitches. They'd say, well, take the Steelies out and put some rubbers on, we're playing. You think you're having a laugh. You're having a laugh, ain't you? So we've got through to the FA Cup. Wonderful win against Notts County. And then we're getting through to February, and then there's a meeting of the directors, and as Bendel said, it wasn't a vote of no confidence in Ron Saunders, but the day after, on the 9th of February, and a town called Malice from the Jam was number one, Ron leaves Villa Park. What was that like for you players? You must have been in a state of shock.
It was a total shock. All I remember Ron had phoned me the night before and said there was a problem at the club.
Yeah.
But there's no way I'm going to resign.
Yeah.
So see you tomorrow at training. But I didn't see Ron the next day at training.
Mm.
For some reason, he decided to go. And the next thing we know, and because the other thing, Paul, I don't remember Ron turning up at the training ground the next day to say goodbye.
Right.
I don't remember. I can't remember us having a sit down with Ron where he's explained to us that he's resigning and he's off. Yeah, I think he just resigned and that was it. He never came back again. Yeah.
You didn't.
If anything, no, he didn't come to the. I can't remember him coming to the ground, the training ground. No.
Did he phone you up after that conversation? How late in the day was it when you see you tomorrow, Dennis?
No, this was the evening before.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So how late in the evening? So what had happened?
Oh yeah, it was
from
like,
that.
Probably about 8 o'clock, of something like that. Yeah.
And he would have gone to bed probably at 10, 11 o'clock. So what happened in them 3 hours that made him change his mind? Must have had a row with Bendel.
Yeah, he's continued his conversation. Yeah, he's continued his conversation, isn't he? Yeah, he must have done.
Must have.
And then he's not. Bendel's and Ron have decided that neither of them is going to sort of back down.
Yeah.
And Ron has done the thing which he thinks is the only way. Whether he was calling the bluff, I don't know. But Mr. Bendel didn't take it that way. He thought, well, okay, if you want to leave, Ron, you can go. Yeah. So
just incredible.
The reason he left, Ron's never really discussed it. You can, in that book about Ron and out out here on it. What was it called again?
It's called
Ron's book.
The Odd Man Out by Graham.
The Odd Man Out, yeah. Because I did read it. I've read that. In that book, there's no definitive answer. Yeah, there's plenty of speculation because obviously Ron's only quoted from what he quoted to the press. He's never quoted to the guy who wrote it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's all sort of what the guys picked up, from the newspapers at the time. So Ron doesn't have to have any input in that book. Besides what is written by what he's actually said before. So you don't really know what's gone on between the pair of them, and neither of them was happy enough to say, well, this is why Ron's gone, or Ron turning around and saying, this is why I'm left.
And thanks for listening to part 1 of this episode with Dennis Mortimer. Part 2 coming shortly.